I deleted the database. All of it. 47 years of company data. Every client record, every transaction, every email, every project file. I deleted it deliberately, methodically, knowing exactly what I was doing. And when the system finished erasing those final files, I didn't feel guilty. I felt relieved. But I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I had no choice. At least, that's what I tell myself. My name is Patricia, and I'm 60 years old. I've worked for the same company for 45 years. I've never missed a day. I've never called in sick when I wasn't actually sick. I've never left early. I was the kind of employee that companies want: loyal, reliable, invisible. And last year, that loyalty was repaid with theft. Let me take you back. This story didn't start with rage. It started with trust. And it's a story about what happens when you discover that everything you built your life around was a lie. I was hired in 1978. I remember the date because it was 3 days after my 16th birthday. Mitchell & Associates was a small marketing firm then, maybe 30 employees, operating out of a converted warehouse in downtown Portland. I walked in as a file clerk, making minimum wage, wearing my mother's hand-me-down blazer because I couldn't afford my own. The owner, David Mitchell, hired me himself. I'll never forget his first words to me: "Patricia, this company is going to grow, and we're going to grow together. I don't care how old you are or what fancy degree you have. I care about who shows up every day and does the work. That's the only currency that matters here." For 45 years, I believed him. I started in the file room, but by year 5, I'd become indispensable. I learned the business inside and out. I moved to data management, then IT, then systems administration. When computers became the backbone of the company, I became the person who kept them running. By my 30s, I was the head of operations. By my 40s, I was the only person who truly understood the full architecture of every system Mitchell & Associates had built. David never promoted me to executive level. I never had a fancy title or a corner office. But everyone knew that Patricia ran this company. Not in a visible way. In the way that the engine runs a car. Invisible, essential, permanent. "You're like family here," David would say every few years, usually over a Christmas party or a company anniversary dinner. "I don't know what would happen if you ever left us." I loved hearing that. I think that's the important context here. I didn't just work for Mitchell & Associates. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the work. I loved the feeling of being needed and valued. After my divorce in my early 30s, after my sister moved across the country, after I realized I'd never have children, the company became my family. The people I worked with became my people. I knew their kids' names. I sent flowers when their mothers died. I covered their shifts when they had emergencies. And they treated me like I mattered. Or at least, that's what I believed. David retired in 2010. He'd built the company to 200 employees, with offices in 3 states. He'd turned a warehouse operation into a real business. When he handed over the reins to his son, Andrew, I thought nothing would change. I was wrong. Andrew was different from his father. He was ambitious in a way that felt different, not about building something meaningful, but about maximizing profit. Within 2 years, he'd brought in a new management team. Professional managers. People with MBAs and 5-year plans and quarterly projections. They looked at our company and saw inefficiency. They looked at me and saw an old woman holding onto outdated systems. The first sign that something was changing, they hired a new IT director in 2018. His name was Marcus, and he was smart. 28 years old, fresh out of Stanford, with impressive credentials. Andrew clearly loved him. I could see it in the way they talked, excited, aligned, like they were going to transform the company together. Marcus' first project was to audit the legacy systems. Translation: he wanted to understand everything I did and probably replace me with something more modern. I didn't fight it. I showed him everything. I documented every process, every database, every backup protocol. I trained him for 3 months, sitting at my desk, walking him through decades of accumulated knowledge. By mid-2019, I was marginalized. Not fired, but moved to a consulting role. Reduced hours, reduced responsibilities, reduced presence. They kept me around in case something broke, but mostly I was just waiting. I was 54 years old, and I was waiting to be fired. My salary stayed the same, though. That was the unspoken agreement. I'd fade into the background, and they'd let me keep working until I reached 65 or decided to retire. It wasn't a great deal, but it felt like security. I should have seen it coming when the company started changing hands again in 2022. Private equity had noticed us. A firm called Titan Capital wanted to buy Mitchell and Associates. It was a good offer, good for the company, good for the remaining founders, good for everyone except the employees who'd built this place. The sale was supposed to close in late 2023. I knew about it before most employees did. Not because anyone told me, but because I still had access to the systems, and I still knew how to read the electronic signals that passed through our networks. I saw the emails between lawyers. I saw the financial projections. I saw the redundancy analysis, which departments would be consolidated, which would disappear, which managers would be let go. According to that analysis, I wouldn't exist anymore. I was a legacy cost center. My position would be eliminated for efficiency. I was 3 years away from retirement. Not enough to live comfortably forever, but enough to get by. I'd been careful with money. I'd never married again after my marriage failed on the basis of me prioritizing my work over family. I didn't have expensive hobbies. I had a modest house, a paid-off car, and enough in my 401k to maybe, possibly, live until I was 80. But here's what I didn't plan for: running out of time before the sale closed. The first missed paycheck came in October 2023. Just a week late. The email from accounting said it was a processing delay due to system updates during the transition period. I didn't worry. This happened sometimes. I'd wait, and it would appear. But it didn't appear. By November, I was 2 months behind. I called accounting. The woman I spoke to, Jennifer, said they were working on the payroll reconciliation, and that everything would be sorted by month end. She sounded nervous. I recognized that tone. It's the tone people use when they know something is wrong but can't say it out loud. I asked to speak to Andrew. The answer was that he was in meetings with the acquisition team all week. November ended. Still no paychecks. December arrived, and now I was 3 months behind. That was $4,800 I wasn't getting. I was still paying my mortgage, my utilities, my groceries, out of my savings. 3 months of retirement savings, disappearing every single month just to keep myself alive. I called again. This time, I got a different answer. The payroll department is understaffed due to the acquisition. You'll need to submit your hours to Marcus directly, and he'll escalate the issue. I submitted my hours. I sent 3 emails to Marcus. He didn't respond. By January, I was 6 months behind. That was $9,600. I had to have a conversation with my mortgage lender about a payment plan. Do you know how humiliating that is? After 45 years of never missing a payment? After decades of financial responsibility, suddenly you have to call your bank and say, "I'm having trouble?" That's when I walked into Andrew's office without an appointment. He was on a conference call, but his assistant let me through anyway. I think she saw something in my face that made her understand this was important. "We need to talk about my paychecks," I said. Andrew's face went red. Actually red. Like I'd embarrassed him in front of the people on his screen. "Patricia, I'm in a meeting with the equity team. Can you schedule something with my assistant?" "I'm 6 months behind, Andrew. That's almost $10,000. I need to know when I'm getting paid." He looked directly at the camera on his laptop, then back at me. "Look, there are some cash flow issues due to the acquisition timeline. Everything will be settled once the sale closes. Should be any day now." "Any day." "Andrew, the sale was supposed to close in November." He waved his hand dismissively. "These things take time. There are regulatory issues. But once we're under Titan Capital, everything will be sorted. Your back pay will come through. Just be patient. Be patient." I was a 60-year-old woman who hadn't missed a day of work in 45 years, and he was telling me to be patient about being owed 6 months of salary. I left his office. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just left. By February, I was 7 months behind. That was more than $13,000. And now something had shifted inside me. I went from confusion and discomfort to something colder. Clarity. I realized this wasn't a mistake. This was strategy. The company was struggling financially, and they were deliberately withholding employee paychecks to manage cash flow while they negotiated the sale. They were stealing from us. From people like Jennifer in accounting. From the junior designers who just started their careers. From me, a woman with 45 years of loyalty and a mortgage to pay. That's when I started looking at the acquisition documents more carefully. I had access. They'd never revoked my credentials because, in the chaos of management changes, they'd probably forgotten I ever had them. I pulled up the contract between Mitchell and Associates and Titan Capital. There was a severance clause. Employees would receive 1 week of severance for every year of service, up to a maximum of 26 weeks. That would be generous, except for one thing. The severance would be paid by Titan Capital after the acquisition closed, not by Mitchell and Associates before. And then I found something worse. An email from Andrew to a financial advisor discussing wage deferral strategies. Basically, a plan to deliberately not pay employees until the sale closed, so that the deferred wages would appear as a liability that Titan would have to assume. It was a way of hiding the company's cash problems. It was fraud. I felt something break inside me. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet way. Like a bone that cracks but doesn't shatter. You can still function, but you know something fundamental has changed. I called a lawyer. I'd never done that before. I found one who specialized in employment law, and I made an appointment. His name was David Chen, and he was about 35, smart-looking, and kind. I sat in his office on a cold February morning and told him my story. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. Patricia, what's been done to you is wage theft. It's illegal. And you have leverage. What kind of leverage? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. You have access to their systems. You have administrative credentials that they haven't revoked. The database for a company like Mitchell and Associates is probably worth millions, possibly tens of millions. If that data disappeared, the acquisition would fall apart. Titan Capital wouldn't buy a company with a compromised database. The sale would tank. Your employer would have no choice but to pay the wages they owe you, because they'd have no cash to do anything else. I stared at him. Are you telling me to delete the database? No, he said carefully. I'm telling you what your leverage is. Whether you use it, how you use it, and when you use it, that's your decision. But you should understand that you have options. You're not helpless. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Power. For 2 weeks, I did nothing. I kept going to work. I kept pretending everything was normal. I watched as more employees began asking about paychecks, and HR just kept deflecting them. I watched as the energy in the office shifted from excitement about the acquisition to growing fear and resentment. And I thought about David's words, you have leverage. I started documenting everything. Every email about the wage deferral strategy. Every message where Andrew discussed the acquisition timeline. Every piece of evidence that proved this wasn't an accounting error, it was deliberate. I also reached out to other employees, carefully. I had coffee with Jennifer from accounting, and she confirmed what I suspected. They were deliberately holding paychecks. She'd been told by finance not to process them until the acquisition closed. She felt like she was complicit in the theft, and she was struggling with it. I talked to the senior designers, the account managers, the operations people. Everyone had the same story. They were behind on bills. They were stressed. They were angry. And they were starting to understand that the people running this company had betrayed their trust. By mid-February, I had a folder full of evidence. I gave it all to David, my lawyer. He reviewed it and then told me something that shifted everything. Patricia, they're destroying evidence. I've been monitoring regulatory filings, and the acquisition documents they submitted to the SEC don't include the wage deferral information. If this sale closes as planned, Titan will discover that they've bought a company with hidden liabilities and wage theft. That might trigger litigation, but it also might mean your back pay gets buried in bankruptcy proceedings. What does that mean? I asked. It means you might not get paid, he said bluntly. The company might declare bankruptcy post-acquisition, and employee wages are low priority in bankruptcy court. You'd be waiting years for pennies on the dollar. He was right. I could see it clearly now. This was going to happen if I did nothing. The sale would close. I'd lose my job. I'd get some severance. And I'd probably never see those $13,000. That's when I realized the full weight of the decision I was facing. David laid it out. If you delete the database, you create a crisis. The company will need to pay your back wages to get you to restore it. But there's legal risk for you. Deliberate data destruction is serious, even if your motivation is protecting your interests. I won't lie to you, you could face criminal charges. But you also have a strong defense. You were protecting your compensation while facing wage theft. I asked him the question I really wanted to ask. If I do this, what's the worst that could happen? Criminal charges, civil suits, difficulty getting another job if this becomes public. But also possibly, recovery of your back pay and the prevention of other employees from getting screwed. I asked him the other question, what's the best that could happen? The company panics. The sale falls apart. You get paid. Other employees get paid. The legal system punishes wage theft. In my mind, I was already making the decision. I just needed confirmation that I wouldn't be making it alone. If you do this, David said, I'll represent you. I'll fight for you. But you need to understand, this is not a guarantee. This is you choosing to fight back instead of accepting what's happened. That night, I went home to my quiet house. I sat in my living room and looked at the mortgage statement on my coffee table. 45 years of work, and I was terrified I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. 45 years of loyalty, and the people I'd trusted had stolen from me. I thought about David Mitchell, the founder. I thought about his advice, the only currency that matters is who shows up every day and does the work. I'd shown up. I'd done the work. And I'd been paid with lies. That's when I decided. I spent the next 3 days gathering copies of everything. Every email, every document, every piece of evidence that proved the wage theft and the database destruction were connected. I gave everything to David and told him my plan. When I delete this database, I said, I need you to immediately send a letter to their legal team informing them that I have a backup and that I'm willing to restore it in exchange for full back pay for all employees plus my severance. He nodded. I'll have it ready to send the minute you tell me it's done. On Thursday, February 29th, I didn't go to the office. I was sick. I texted Marcus. I had a migraine. I needed to stay home. Instead, I set up a private encrypted connection to the company servers from my home computer. No one could trace it. No one would know I'd done it until it was too late. I had spent 45 years being invisible. Now I was going to use that invisibility. At 3 a.m. on Friday morning, I initiated the deletion protocol. I watched the progress bar as it counted down. 47 years of data. Client records. Financial records. Project files. Communication history. All of it disappearing, line by line. It took 4 hours. When it was finished, I felt completely calm. I'd done it. I'd crossed a line that I could never uncross. And I wasn't afraid. I was ready. At 6 a.m., I sent a single email to the entire company. I discovered a critical system failure overnight. The main database has experienced catastrophic corruption. Full restoration from backups will take 3 to 4 weeks. During this time, we may experience service disruptions. Then I called David. It's done. I'll never forget what happened next. By 7 a.m., I received an email from Andrew asking me to come into the office immediately. I took my time. I made coffee. I showered. I got dressed carefully, like I was preparing for battle, which I suppose I was. When I walked in, security was waiting for me at the desk. Not to arrest me, just to escort me to Andrew's office. The entire executive team was there. Andrew, Marcus, the CFO, the company lawyer. They looked panicked. Because even though it had been just an hour, they were already understanding what a deleted database meant. The acquisition was in jeopardy. Andrew's face was purple with rage. What the hell did you do? I came into work and ran the system diagnostics you asked me to do last week, I said calmly. I discovered corruption in the main database. I initiated emergency protocols. You deleted it, Marcus said, and I could hear the accusation in his voice. I initiated a system recovery process, I corrected. These things happen with corrupted databases. Patricia, the company lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine, leaned forward. Let's not play games. Did you deliberately destroy the database? I looked at her. I'd like to speak to my lawyer before answering any questions. That's when David walked in. I'd called him as I drove to the office, and he'd gotten there in record time. Ms. Patricia Chen's employment rights are protected, David announced. I'd advise everyone here to cease this line of questioning unless you plan to provide her with legal representation, which would be a conflict of interest. Catherine's expression shifted. She was a lawyer. She knew exactly what this meant. I prepared for this. I planned for this. What do you want? Andrew asked bluntly. My back pay, I said simply. 7 months. $13,820. For all of the employees who haven't been paid. All of them. Plus my severance as outlined in my employment contract. That's extortion, Andrew said. No, David corrected. That's a demand for compensation owed under law. Ms. Patricia hasn't committed a crime. She's asserting her rights as an employee. The database is the company's most valuable asset, Catherine said. What you're describing is destruction of property. What I'm describing, I said, is a woman protecting her interests while being subjected to wage theft. I have a backup. I'm prepared to restore the database in exchange for immediate payment of all withheld wages. For the next 3 hours, they tried to intimidate me. They tried to convince me I'd committed a crime. They tried to threaten me. But David was there, and he was good. He pushed back on every accusation. He reminded them that I had evidence of wage theft. He pointed out that destroying my career in retaliation would be illegal. And then, around 10 a.m., Catherine got a phone call. I watched her face as she listened. And I watched it go pale. When she hung up, she said quietly, Titan Capital's legal team has discovered the wage deferral strategy. They're reviewing the acquisition agreement. They want a response from our legal team about the hidden employee liabilities. Andrew's eyes went wide. They know. The SEC filing was incomplete, Catherine said. And now they're conducting due diligence and finding information that wasn't disclosed. This is a serious problem. She looked at me with something like respect. You knew this would happen. I knew that destroying evidence was a crime, I said. I also knew that the sale was structured on incomplete information. I just ensured that information would come to light. The room was completely silent. Catherine turned to Andrew and Marcus. We need to settle with Patricia. Immediately. If Titan discovers we retaliated against an employee who discovered wage theft, the acquisition falls apart entirely. We're not settling, Andrew said stubbornly. Catherine's response was ice cold. Then we're losing the company. The choice is yours. That's when Titan Capital's legal team called. They wanted to know why a key company database had just been corrupted. They wanted answers. They wanted to understand the security implications. And suddenly, Andrew understood. The database wasn't just corrupted for me. It was corrupted for the acquisition. The sale, which had been his entire plan, his entire future, was now in jeopardy. By noon, he was ready to negotiate. We settled quickly. Full back pay for all employees, $422,000. My severance, $12,000. And a written acknowledgement that the withheld wages were the result of company financial mismanagement, not employee error. In exchange, I restored the database. It took me an hour. I walked to my desk, logged in, and ran the restoration protocol from the backup I'd carefully maintained. With every file that reappeared, I felt something releasing inside me. By 2 p.m., the database was restored. The sale with Titan Capital was not. Because here's what happened. Once Titan discovered the wage theft and the cover-up, they realized they couldn't trust anything the company's leadership told them. They started their own investigation. They discovered other financial irregularities. They discovered that the company had been hiding losses. They withdrew from the acquisition. And without the acquisition money, Mitchell and Associates didn't have the cash to survive. By April, the company was in bankruptcy. So did I do the right thing by deleting the database? I ask myself that question every day. Some people would say I went too far. They'd say I could have sued, could have waited for the legal system, could have handled this differently. And maybe they're right. Maybe if I'd been younger, had more time, could have afforded months of litigation, there was another path. But I was 60 years old. I had 3 years until retirement. I couldn't afford to wait. I couldn't afford to risk bankruptcy proceedings that might have left me with nothing. What I could afford was to fight back. Here's what actually happened. Because of the wage theft investigation, the Federal Department of Labor got involved. They fined Mitchell and Associates $245,000 in penalties. All of that money went into a restitution fund for affected employees. Everyone got paid. But more than that, everyone learned something. That staying silent about injustice doesn't protect you. It destroys you. The irony is that Andrew Mitchell still tried to claim that I'd ruined the company. He claimed I'd sabotaged the acquisition out of spite. But the evidence told a different story. The wage theft, the cover-up, the deliberate financial mismanagement, these were the things that destroyed the acquisition. I just made sure they couldn't be hidden. Is he facing criminal charges? No. The statute of limitations on wage theft in Oregon is short, and by the time the Department of Labor finished its investigation, it had expired. He'll probably go on to run another company, and he'll probably do the same thing again. But his reputation is destroyed. People know what he did. People know what kind of person he is. And me. I'm starting over at 60 years old. I took a job at a tech company doing systems administration. It pays less than I was making before, and I'm working with younger people who don't understand that I've already done this work 3 times over. But my paychecks arrive on time. My contributions are valued. I'm not invisible. My therapist asked me once if I regretted deleting the database. I thought about that for a long time before answering. No, I said. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I spent 45 years being loyal to people who didn't deserve it. I regret that I spent so much of my life making myself smaller so that other people could feel bigger. But I don't regret the choice I made when I had no choice. The truth is, that database isn't what I'm proud of deleting. What I deleted was 45 years of accepting less than I deserved. I'm 60 years old. I'm starting a new career. I'm learning that I have value beyond my usefulness to a company. And I'm learning that sometimes, fighting back is the only way to survive. If you're in a similar situation, if you're being treated unfairly, if you're being stolen from, please don't do what I did. Please find another way. But know that you have options. Know that you have leverage. Know that you don't have to accept injustice because you're afraid or tired or old. The system is designed to protect people with power. But sometimes, if you're smart and careful and brave, you can use the system against itself. And sometimes, that's the only justice available. Have you experienced wage theft? Have you been treated unfairly by an employer and didn't know what to do? Comment your story below. I want to hear it. I want you to know that you're not alone. Which moment shocked you most? Was I wrong to delete the database? Let me know what you think. This is a community, and I want to hear your perspective, even if you disagree with me. Subscribe to this channel if you believe that justice matters. Subscribe if you think that people who work hard deserve to be paid fairly. Subscribe for more stories from people who fought back against injustice. Tomorrow, I'll be sharing a story from a woman who found her husband's secret phone, and she decided to send a text. She risked everything to expose him. You won't believe what happened when it escalated. And if you're going through something similar right now, please reach out. You're not alone. There are people who can help. There are lawyers who specialize in wage theft. There are resources available. You just have to be brave enough to use them. This is Patricia. Thank you for listening to my story.